So today we're going to talk specifically about credit card reconciliation. But what I wanted to do is just take a step back for a moment and talk about, I think really kind of the theme of today's presentation is what's new in TimberScan. And I'm not going to focus on all of the new items. We're going to focus specifically on credit card. But I brought up this PowerPoint slide because I wanted to emphasize the fact that I'm sure for many of you, all of you are using TimberScan today, you're familiar with the conventional TimberScan application that you log into on a regular basis, whether that's to enter invoices, approve invoices, whatever it might be. But over the course of the last several years, Core Associates has developed a number of tools, cloud-based tools, that are built around that base TimberScan application. So think of TimberScan in the middle here as being that base, the product that you typically log into every day, with a number of cloud-based solutions that kind of revolve around TimberScan and work basically as an extension of TimberScan in the cloud. One of those, not the least of which, would be our TimberScan Go for mobile approvals. Some of you are probably familiar with that, probably using TimberScan Go to, for approvers being able to approve invoices on a mobile device, using any type of device that they want. They can be out in the field, they can be anywhere they happen to be, and they can still pull up their invoices and they can approve them. So the same concept is what we're going to apply today with respect to talking about credit card. So I'm going to walk through just a few brief PowerPoint slides, and then we're going to jump right into the product. But I thought just to kind of set this up, let's talk a little bit about credit card. So as all of you are fully aware, I don't need to tell you this, but obviously credit cards being used by construction companies more today to purchase goods and services than ever before. Those credit card transactions being processed in accounting, if you will, and trying to do that reconciliation process takes an incredible amount of time. What the credit card solution does, we found just in our analysis with the clients that are using it, that are currently using TimberScan, that they've been able to eliminate about 70% of the time it normally takes to reconcile their credit card transactions against the state. Credit card solution allows you the opportunity to record costs to jobs and expenses so that it's not a kind of a second or third hand process. It could be happening at the point in time when that transaction is made. And then of course it's fully integrated, works obviously, as I said, as an extension of TimberScan, and also allows you to be able to access everything from Sage 300 that you would if you were sitting in conventional TimberScan. If I'm going to pull up job information, cost code, general ledger account code, vendor, all of that information is at my access when I'm processing credit card transactions, the same way that it would be if I were sitting in TimberScan like I normally would today. So here's a kind of a workflow depiction, if you will, of the credit card solution. So things are going to start at the point where that purchase has been made and a receipt has been derived. What the person who's made that purchase can do is they can open up their credit card app on their phone. They can fill out some very basic information, not a whole lot is required. They can take a picture of the receipt and attach it to the form, or they could just put it in their gallery and they could call it up later on, and they can just attach, a series of PDFs or whatever it might be. But once they've gone through and they've submitted that particular receipt, it sends it into what we call the credit cards reconciliation program. That data is aggregated. You have the ability to edit, reconcile, and approve those transactions within a very easy to use, we'll call it, kind of looks like a spreadsheet, but it's more of like an approval grid. Once the reconciliation process is done, it sends those transactions to TimberScan so that you actually have created an invoice from the credit card receipts. That invoice can be created in a couple of different ways. Some clients would like to be able to send basically one statement over to TimberScan as an invoice with the receipts as supporting documents. That's referred to as statement style, or others prefer to have each of the individual receipts create separate instances or invoices, if you will, in TimberScan. Either way, the system works in essence the same way, regardless of which method you choose. It's really your preference, but once you've done that, if, for example, that invoice after the reconciliation has been created, perhaps it's not fully coded, because maybe back here when the person was filling out the form, they didn't necessarily apply, for example, what job or cost code it might have been associated with. That can still be done in TimberScan, like always. So the invoice has now been created, and the invoice can be sent off to the approvers, and then the approvers can go through, they can do whatever coding they need to. Obviously, when the approval process is done, it sends that transactional data to Sage 300 CRE, and everything gets updated just like any other normal invoice. So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk through this workflow process, and we're going to talk about the different ways in which we can go about doing this. I'll kind of finish up by just talking about a few of the features, being that you can capture receipts on the fly or from the gallery. It is all web-based, mobile routing for reviewing and coding if necessary. You can capture digital signatures if need be. It's available on a mobile app for offline processing. And then entry point validation for error-free entry, meaning when we talk about entry point validation, we're validating jobs, we're validating cost codes, general ledger accounts codes, vendors, all of those things, so that it's very easy when someone is processing a transaction that they're not having to guess. They're putting in accurate entry point information. And again, we talked about the different methods in which that information can be transported over to TimberScan, whether that's receipt style, whether that's statement style, and what have you. So there are different options by which we can go about doing this. But at this point, I think what I'm going to do is let's back out of the PowerPoint. And let's actually go into the application. And we'll kind of walk through this process. We'll take it from the beginning, and we'll just kind of walk through the various steps. Now, I've already logged into TimberScan. Sure, you're familiar with this, obviously the various tools and what have you that are available to me in TimberScan. But where I'm going today is that extension of TimberScan, which is my credit card program, which is over here. Now, just a word about this particular application. When this was designed, it was originally created as a forms tool. So at its core, the basis of this particular application is to be able to process forms. And when we're done talking about credit card, I'm going to also include in there expense approvals, because actually that's included as part of the credit card reconciliation program. But think of, for example, expenses. Let's just take that before we actually get into the credit card program. So what happens is if I go out and I incur some expenses, maybe I've put those expenses on a company credit card. Somehow or other, I need to be able to take those receipts and I need to submit them back to accounting, and accounting needs to be able to take and reconcile those expenses by what it is that I did. So the expense approval program allows you to fill out a form, an electronic form, whether it's on my phone, whether it's on my desktop, wherever I am, but I'm able to fill out that form like I would be filling out a basic expense reimbursement form, for example. And then I go ahead and submit that, and it sends it to accounting where reconciliation, if you will, can be done. Same concept applies with credit cards, and that's where we're going to go next. But everything is going to start with a form. We're going to start by filling out a form at the point in time when that receipt was initially captured. So we're going to go there first. Before I actually get into the menu here and we jump into the credit card program, I'm just going to go into my forms, and you'll see that I have a number of forms that I have access to that I'm able to fill out. I can do things like field purchase orders. I can have a job picture form, receiving tickets. But where we're going to go and focus specifically right now is I'm going to talk about my job costing credit card form. You can see that I have different credit card forms that I could potentially fill out. You know, depending on how my company chooses to process their credit card transactions. Going to open this up. We're going to fill it out. Now, again, I'm sitting here at my desktop doing this, but let's just envision for one moment. I'm going to switch this format, and I'm going to simulate as if I were on on an iPhone X. So this works on Android, it works on iPhone, it doesn't matter. But let's say that I went to, for example, Home Depot, and I made a purchase. I have my receipt. Now what I can do, I take my phone, open up my credit card app, and I just go through and I say, okay, what's today's date? And some of this can just default in. So I don't have to necessarily fill out all this information. I'll just plug in, for example, I could have had the date and me as the card holder already defaulted for me. So I don't even have to fill out that information. Could say where I purchased this from. Maybe it was Home Depot, for example. I could say what the dollar amount was. Maybe it was $355.10. Put in any notes that I need to. Here's where, if I were, sitting there with the receipt, I could take a picture of the receipt right from here, and I could attach it. Or maybe I put that receipt into my gallery, and I decided it's in one of my files or what have you, and I can just go out and I can grab that particular receipt, and I'll pull it up from wherever it is. Maybe it's a picture or something else that I want to just go ahead and attach. So we just go ahead and attach whatever that receipt is. And then if I were filling some of this information out, maybe I want to get to the point where I'm starting to plug in, for example, dollar amount, line items. Maybe there are certain, line item information that I want to be able to transact out. Or I just want to say, for example, let's charge this all to job 03001. Maybe it's to cost code, whatever that cost code might be. See how, as I'm pulling up this information, it's going out, it's searching the job file. It's searching the cost codes for that job. And it's allowing me to go through and it's processing. So this is what we mean by entry point validation, where I'm able to select this information and it's validating it against the master file information from Sage 300. If I wanted to, maybe I have an electronic signature or what have you, I go through and I sign this, and I can go ahead and submit this form. Now there's a difference between what's called routing the form and submitting it. What routing does is, think of this as kind of route on the fly, where maybe I've taken a picture of this receipt, I filled it out, maybe I want to send it to someone else in my organization for them to review for some reason. Not necessarily to approve it, just to basically review it for whatever reason. I could do that. What submitting does is it basically says, okay, I'm finished with the form. I've gone ahead, I've attached my receipt to the form, and I'm now submitting it, and it's going to go into the workflow process, similar to a workflow that could take place with TimberScan. So let's say I submit this and it has to go to my supervisor before it actually hits accounting, for accounting to do the reconciliation. So I can hit submit. I'm going to actually close this back out here for a moment. Let's get out of there, so that we bring it back to normal size. So I could go through here, I could hit submit, and when I submit that particular form, depending on the workflow that's designed, it's possible that there might be another person or people who might need to go through and review that form. So what are they going to see? Well, what they're going to see is they're going to get that particular form into their inbox. And then what they would do is they would open up their inbox. They'll get an email notification letting them know that they have a form, for example, from me that they need to fill out. They can click on the hyperlink, and it will take them right to the form. So I could click on that hyperlink from the email. I can open up this form, and I'm able to see, whatever information has already been filled out on that form. I think I have one. If I back up for a second, might already have some information on it. No, okay. So you get the idea. So basically, this could have been a form that I submitted where, some of this information has already been filled in. I'm the approver. I go through, I look at this. Maybe I, clean something up here. I might be able to go through and, add the job and cost code. So let's say that we had a concept, and we're going to fill in a couple of fields here. Okay, so we're going to say Depot, say it's 355.10. And so we're just going to say that this is what was filled in. And we'll also say that, for example, maybe there was a receipt that was attached, which I can go out and grab a receipt just to make it even more realistic here. Let's go take this Home Depot receipt. We'll attach it. Whoops. It's got to come in here. Put it in the wrong spot. There it is. Okay. So I can go attach that receipt. And once the receipt is attached, we now have the receipt with that particular form. And if I were the approver at this point, I could come in here and say, well, you know what? When Mike filled this out, he didn't happen to put in the job and cost code. So at this point, maybe I can code it. So yeah, you know what? I know it's associated with job 03001. I know what cost code it's associated with. So I could potentially fill it out. So this is second level, not only approval, but also coding. First person that made the acquisition and attached the receipt didn't do the coding. I see it. I'm the supervisor. I know what this is supposed to be charged to. I could code it here if I need to, sign it, and then I can just go ahead and I can submit the form. So that's a possibility as well. So now we've gotten to the point where purchase was made, form was filled out, very little information needed to be plugged in, picture of the receipt was attached, off it goes. Now the approver goes through, they might be, reviewing, doing any additional coding or cleanup or whatever they do. They submit. Now let's say there's no one else in the workflow. This is going off to accounting for reconciliation. So at this point, we'll go into the credit card program. We'll kind of walk through some of the options here. So one thing you do here, there is some, we'll call it administrative tasks and what have you, where you determine who your card suppliers are, whether it's, it's Home Depot maybe, or this is, we used a credit card from Bank of America or whatever it might be. So you can fill out your card supplier information. You can specify what employees have access to these cards. And then we have a couple of other tools here, but I'm going to focus specifically on the statement tool here. So what happens is that when you establish your card supplier, TimberScan has the ability to take the information from that particular credit card company and download the statement for you. So, having to receive a statement in the mail and go through the reconciliation process on a piece of paper. The whole idea, the whole concept with the credit card program is similar to the concept with TimberScan. Let's eliminate the paper throughout the entire process. So no one has to touch paper all along the way. Once that receipt gets a picture of that receipt gets captured, all the paper goes away. We don't need to handle paper anywhere after that. So now we took a picture, we submitted it, we come in here, I'm going to go in and I'm going to open up my statements. These are some of the statements that were downloaded, and I'm just going to open up this particular one here. And let's just go through here. I'm going to open this up a little bit more. We're going to bring up some open transactions so we get a little bit more meat in here. All right. So on the left-hand side, what you're seeing, these are all of the statement items that were downloaded. On the right-hand side are the receipts that were submitted. And you notice when I came in, what I did is I opened this up and I have different options here. So if I wanted to see this reconciliation program where all I wanted to see were just the reconciled receipts, I could pull that up. Just the ones that are in progress that haven't necessarily been, we'll call reconciled and sent off to TimberScan, open items, just anything that hasn't been reconciled at all, and all being, I want to see everything that's associated with this statement. I want to see anything that is not only open, but also has been reconciled so far. That's what's in green. That's what's been checked off here. They've already been reconciled. But we have some open items down here. So basically what I can do is, as I'm kind of scrolling along here and I'm looking at this particular transaction, the one that's $21.54. If I want, I can just click on the receipt file and I can open up a copy of the receipt. So here's that receipt, for example. This one came from Office Depot. I can see, has the form been submitted? If I wanted to edit the form. So now I'm in kind of stage 3 of this process. We've had the person who made the purchase, who filled out maybe some basic information on the form and submitted it. Maybe there's an approver involved who reviewed the information that was submitted and they said, okay, we're good, send it on. Now this is step 3 of the process, where this particular person in accounting could come in here and say, well, yeah, I know that this particular receipt was associated with this particular job 03001, and it was for this cost code. And if I have the security rights to be able to do this, even though this may have already been filled out, maybe I realized that, whoops, that was really the wrong cost code. So now I can come in here and I can search and I can go through it and I can change it. I can add more cost codes if I need to, less, what have you. But the whole idea is this is now 3rd step where I potentially could go through and I could affect some of the coding on that particular form. Other things that I can do here, obviously, this was a receipt that wasn't supposed to be associated with this particular statement transaction, so we're just going to go ahead and delete it. What the eyeball does is it kind of gives me just a quick snapshot overview of where we stand. Think of this more like a tooltip, where I'm able to go in here and just see, here's the dollar amount, here's the job and cost code that's associated with it, the category, the GL account code. So I have all that information in front of me. And then if I just want to open the receipt, I can do that as well. So I can, create a separate file where I just want to open up the receipt itself and see that information. That's over here. Okay, so finally, what I might want to do is I might want to go down and I'm looking at my transactions and I can say, okay, let's just go ahead. Here's my statement items. Here are my transactions. Let's just go ahead and hit the reconcile button, which is here. And when I reconcile, basically what the system is going to do is it's going to start matching the receipts to the statement. So it looks at certain criteria, and you're able to set this up beforehand with respect to kind of that initial setup of credit card program. But in this case, what the system is going to do is it's going to look at the date, the amount, the balance, and who the card holder was, for example. So it matches up these specific criteria here. And when it finds a match, it says, okay, this is the receipt that's associated with this particular transaction. And then what it will do when you reconcile is it will go through, it will reconcile, in this case, it's going to be this transaction right here to this receipt right here. Once that reconciliation process is done, it drops it up here into the reconciled, I call it kind of the reconciled engine. So up here, I imported 10 items from the statement. I've reconciled 4. So I know what my status is. I have everything that I need to. I can save what I've done so far if I need to. Maybe I want to go back. Maybe there are other things that I wanted to reconcile, so I can go ahead and do that. Once I'm finished here, It's at this point where I can click on the transfer to TimberScan button, and it creates that invoice either in statement style or in receipt style, depending on which method you choose. So now think of it this way. Instead of me in accounting having to wait until the end of the month when my statement comes in, and now I'm scrambling to try and get all of the receipts from various people that are in the field and making these purchases, instead what has happened is they've gone through, they've submitted their receipts electronically, no paper involved. I'm reconciling electronically, and then I'm able to take that reconciled statement and create an invoice from it and send that over to TimberScan. Now, what's also nice about this is that you could do this periodically throughout the course of a month. You don't have to wait until the end of the month. You could download your statement every week if you wanted to. And you've got certain receipts that are coming in on a regular basis. You download the statement. Here's what the statement looks like today. You know, maybe 2 weeks from now, it's going to look where we'll have 3 times as many transactions on here. But this is where it is today. These are the receipts that I have today. And I can go through and I can reconcile and let the system go through, do that reconciliation process, drop those transactions to here. And once I'm comfortable with what it has reconciled so far, I hit transfer to TimberScan. What that does is it creates that invoice. And I have an example of a statement style invoice over here. So let's just go look. It's this one right here, I believe. Here we go. So it did what it did. It created this invoice from that credit card statement. I have all of my receipts associated with that particular reconciliation that I have here attached. It also sent over all of the coded data, specifying vendor code, invoice date amount. It also sent over this is what's been coded so far. Now let's say, you know, we've had some receipts that came in where the coding hadn't been completed. Remember, this is now kind of level 4 and step 4 of where I could then accept this particular invoice like any other invoice that I'm processing from accounts payable, send it off to the approver and let the approver finish the coding. So it gives you the flexibility. I don't have to code on the front end. I can get my receipt, a picture of the receipt, get it submitted, let the reconciliation process take place, and I'll code it when I do my normal coding and approval of my invoices, you know, throughout the course of a given month, for example. This is all finished, and once this particular invoice has been coded and approved, gets sent over to Sage 300 like any other invoice. That's basically how simple and easy it is to be able to do this. It's get the receipt, fill out the form, attach the receipt to the form, submit it, reconcile, and once reconciliation is done, create the invoice or invoices that get sent to TimberScan. And that's basically it for how the credit card program works from start to finish, if you will. Now with that, what I also wanted to do, let's just kind of tie this to expense approvals, because expense approvals actually comes with the credit card program. So if you were to implement credit card, you have the option of being able to process expense approvals as well. It's all built into, in essence, one program. Same concept applies that we talked about before. So I can come out here, I can fill out my expense report. I've made some transactions. I went out, I was, you know, out on business for a couple of days. I go through here, plug in who it is that, you know, this person is. You know, here's when things took place. You know, I can also job code it if I need to, put in my dollar amounts, you know, specify any of the information that I need here. I could attach copies of those receipts here, like we saw before. And then I just go through, I do the same thing, submit that particular form. If there's another level of approval that needs to take place, then that person or people would go into their inbox. They would bring up those particular forms, that expense form, review it. Everything looks good. Let's go ahead and approve this. And then that will send it to the expense approval grid down here that you're looking at. Now the grid, the idea, think of this kind of like final review in TimberScan, where those transactions have been, in essence, approved. And now we're taking that last step in the process. And many of the same things that we saw before when we were looking at the credit card program, we can see here. So I can call up, for example, the distribution, how this was coded. I can actually go in and edit the form if I need to and call it up on the screen. So now if I'm going to fill this out or whatever, I can go through and I can see all that info. So all of this is available to me. And then once I'm done, I can go through and approve, and then I just go ahead and I hit that transfer to TimberScan button, and it will take the transaction and it will send it over to TimberScan, not, in this case, not as an AP invoice, but as a document that gets saved in TimberScan AIM. So now I've done my expenses, I can send it over, and then this can also be sent over to Sage 300 CRE if need be, so that if we need to use it for any purpose there, we can do so. So we've kind of walked through the process. It's pretty straightforward. The beauty of this is that we talk about, again, entry point validation, where I'm able to go in and I'm able to see all of my validated information from job, cost code, vendor, whatever it might be. The fact that it's so tightly integrated with both Sage 300 and how it's an extension of TimberScan, where I'm just going through, I'm filling out some basic information. Once it gets reconciled or approved, it gets sent over to TimberScan. Transactions are created from that inside TimberScan, already fully coded, or if they haven't been fully coded for whatever purpose, they can be coded in TimberScan if need be. The workflow process could continue, for example, with credit card, where it can then be, those transactions get sent on to Sage 300, and that loop is then complete. Okay, so Tim mentioned 40 minutes. I took 36, about 4 minutes less than what we anticipated, but at this point, I guess we can open it up for any questions.